This video is sponsored by Best No Copyright Music. Link to their channel is in the description.
The age-old debate, Apple versus Samsung, iPhone versus Galaxy, iOS versus Android. Well, I've certainly had my preferences over the decade and a half or so of this competition, and these two have certainly borrowed from each other and also taken a lot from other OEMs like Nokia, Sony. But in a smartphone world now where you can't go wrong with either, people are still passionate about their preferences. So after having used the S23 Ultra for several months and used it side by side with the iPhone 15 Pro Max for the past few weeks, I'll do my best to tell you what is objectively different and then perhaps how they differ subjectively to help you choose between these two inanimate rivals. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to my iPhone 15 Pro Max versus Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra review. And let's start with design, because it would be hard for these two to be any more different from one another. The S23 Ultra, with its elegant rectangular design that it gradually started adopting since the Note 8, reminiscent of the old Nokia Lumia series, and the iPhone, which has gone in the other direction with Apple progressively making its corners rounder and rounder. The Ultra also has a slightly curved display, probably the least curved it's ever been, while the iPhone's is completely flat. The edges of the Ultra's armor aluminum are a bit more contoured than the iPhone's, but those sharp edges of the iPhone stainless steel have been softened a bit and replaced with titanium. In fact, those edges now look exactly like those of Samsung's Galaxy Z Flip and Z Fold series. That is, flat sides that are just a bit rounded off at the edges. Combine that with being almost 20 grams lighter, and it certainly makes the iPhone 15 Pro Max a bit easier to hold than its predecessor. It's also about 12 grams lighter than this S23 Ultra. And though design will be up to preference, and certainly both of these devices are absolute beauties, in my opinion, I do think the 15 Pro Max is also easier to hold than the S23 Ultra, which I think is especially important to consider when you're dealing with phones this massive. The Ultra does hide fingerprints a bit better as well, despite its polished chassis. While the titanium finish is beautiful on the iPhone, be prepared to lose control of fingerprints quickly. And I have pretty dry hands, so if yours are on the greasier side, I'd recommend you get a color you think looks best in a case, because you'll get kind of tired of using this without one. And the fingerprint thing, by the way, goes for the lighter colors as well. I have a couple of videos on my channel that feature the natural titanium iPhone 15 Pro Max, so check those out if you're curious. Build quality is as good as you'll find in a flagship smartphone on both, with what Apple calls ceramic shield for the glass being paired with that titanium on the iPhone, and Gorilla Glass Victus 2 on the Ultra with its aforementioned armor aluminum. Arbitrary marketing terms that just mean these are reasonably durable, but still glass, so try to be careful. If you're going caseless, maybe don't use your phone while you're on surfaces like concrete. Performance on each of these is an absolute joy, buttery smooth with a 120Hz display on each. Animations are slightly smoother on the iPhone, but I certainly don't think it's anything that should make a purchase decision for you. I don't really bother with benchmarks. I can tell you that in everyday performance, apps and games open equally fast. And if there are any differences, it's negligible. If you find one app opening a fraction of a second faster on one, you'll find a different app opening faster on the other phone. They're tough to catch on camera, but you will occasionally find bugs here and there. And as you've probably heard from others, in the last couple of years, bugs seem to be more prevalent on recent iPhones than Samsung Galaxy flagships. Although I will say that so far I've found fewer issues on iOS 17 on the iPhone 15 Pro Max than I did on iOS 16 with the iPhone 14 Pro this time last year. And on that note, it is worth mentioning that I have not experienced any overheating issue on either the blue titanium or natural titanium iPhone 15 Pro Max, which I'm filming this video with. I have both of those in my possession, and for reference, they're both American models with no SIM tray. Again, no overheating issues for me. So where they really begin to differ, of course, is in how these operating systems are designed. While the iPhone has gotten closer and closer to Android with everything from customization to how notifications are delivered and displayed, the Ultra does still have a solid edge in terms of both software and hardware features. Dual Messenger, the ability to use 2 instances and 2 different accounts of the same messaging app. Secure Folder, which lets you place files and apps behind an extra layer of security. Edge panels for easier shortcuts. True multitasking with customizable pop-out windows and split screen. Samsung DeX, which allows you to use your phone in a desktop computing environment. The list goes on. Meanwhile, Apple has kind of struggled to take full advantage of the larger display on its Pro Max series. You do have a one-handed mode on the phone, but even that implementation is a little bit better on the Ultra. It's not a huge deal. I mean, you can just keep switching between apps as far as multitasking is concerned, but it's these extras that make you feel like you're getting a bit more for your money on the Ultra. And I haven't even gotten to the S Pen yet, which is probably the main reason why the Ultra has a rectangular shape. While I don't use it a ton, the ability to use the S Pen as a Bluetooth remote control for apps like YouTube, and for the camera, and just being able to jot down notes at meetings without needing to bring along a notepad and a pen or a laptop is a nice perk that I do miss when I'm not using an Ultra phone. However, Apple brings its own hardware features to the game. The best thing the company has done in the last 10 years, in my opinion, is MagSafe. I know that's not new this year, but it's still changing the industry in 2023. Before, you needed to attach magnets to the phone yourself or use a special case, but to have them actually built into the phone has made this feature mainstream, and I absolutely love it. I'm not sure when Samsung will start implementing the Qi 2 equivalent, but I sure hope it's soon. Thanks to the European Union, Apple has finally implemented USB-C. At last, one cable can charge all of your devices. I have pretty regular access to electricity, so I'm not as concerned with charging speeds personally. But if you're wondering, this Samsung fast charging brick and cable have both my Ultra and Pro Max charged up in full in under an hour and a half. Now, it is worth mentioning that my S23 Ultra recognizes my exFAT formatted SanDisk Ultra flash drive, but the 15 Pro Max doesn't. Now, both do recognize my Samsung T7 external hard drive. USB microphones, they've been hit or miss on the iPhone, but working pretty consistently on the S23 Ultra. Now, you can also share power between your iPhone and another USB-C device, and it doesn't even have to be another Apple gadget, surprisingly. This is, of course, something you can do on the Ultra as well, but with Samsung's offering, you don't even need the cable. Reverse wireless charging, or PowerShare, will let you share juice with all of your wireless charging enabled accessories and even other smartphones. I can't tell you how many times this has come in clutch for me and for friends and family whose iPhones were running on empty. Yet another overdue but excellent hardware change, in my opinion, from Apple is replacing the mute switch with this action button. I know longtime iPhone users had grown rather attached to the mute switch, but as someone who uses other phones as well, trust me when I tell you, you're going to get a lot more use from this than you did from the mute switch. For one, you can still use it as a mute button, just press and hold by default out of the box. I have mine set to launch the camera. But aside from being able to map the button to one of several different actions, it also doubles as a shutter button for the camera. I think this is useful in several scenarios in which it's inconvenient to be scouring the viewfinder for the touchscreen shutter button. Speaking of the camera, this year's Pro Max is boasting an all-new 5x telephoto lens, replacing the 3x telephoto, which is still in operation on the regular iPhone 15 Pro. It's a nice addition, though it's still half the telephoto offering of the S23 Ultra's 10x optical zoom. Maxing out both the optical and digital zoom, you can see the difference in usability side by side here. And there's still no Pro mode like you get with the S23 Ultra's camera, where you can play with everything, including the ISO. Where the iPhone 15 Pro Max does have the S23 Ultra beat as far as camera features are these next generation portraits, as Apple is calling them, allowing you to adjust focus and bokeh levels after the photo is taken. The camera captures that data when the photo is taken, so you can adjust it later. You hear a lot about iPhones having the best videography in the smartphone game. Here are some 4K samples.
4K 30 frames per second, iPhone 15 Pro Max. While walking now. And jogging, pretty good stabilization. 4K 30 frames per second on the S23 Ultra. Walking and now jogging. Let me know how that stabilization is. Pretty good, I think.
And here's a sample of the respective night modes on each phone. That basketball court is very tough to see with them off. and both do an excellent job illuminating it with night modes on. One thing iPhone cameras have had that I wish Samsung would finally adopt is a 24 frames per second option in any of its video modes. It's one of the industry standards after all, not some obscure arbitrary frame rate. Speaking of things the iPhone has down pat, much is made about ecosystems when pitting flagship smartphones against each other. For me, this is honestly a bit overrated, not because the devices don't work well within their own ecosystems, but because they both do all of the ecosystem stuff just fine. For a while, wireless transfer of photos, videos, and files between my Android devices was actually more reliable. A few others on YouTube have said as much as well, but I think that's been corrected in more recent versions of iOS. I get fewer errors than before when airdropping from my iPhone to my iPad Pro. If the display shut off, it used to just completely cancel the airdrop without even an error message. The point is you can do this stuff between Samsung devices and Apple ones alike. The phones, tablets, and laptops all mostly work seamlessly with each other. So the only reason this should factor into your decision, in my opinion, of which phone to buy is if you already have a MacBook and an iPad, or say a Galaxy Tab and a Galaxy Book, or even a Surface. You're going to be able to text message from a PC or tablet, copy, paste text between devices, etc., within both ecosystems. And if you don't care about doing these things, and it seems most people actually don't utilize those extras, then that ecosystem buzzword should not factor into your buying decision once again, especially if one phone or the other has some features I've mentioned in this video that you really like and expect to use. Call quality on both devices is perfect, speakerphone included. Speaking of the speakers, let's compare them real quick. First, the iPhone. The S23 Ultra. So it might have been tough to hear the difference in a video like this, but both got plenty loud. Both were at max volume. The mids and highs were really crisp on both, though the iPhone 15 Pro Max's speakers did sound a bit fuller to me, slightly bassier. Though at full volume, once again, I feel like the 15 Pro Max was a hair less loud than on last year's iPhone 14 Pro Max. I did also notice slightly less distortion at max volume on the S23 Ultra. Honestly, I don't think there's any difference here worthy enough to factor into your choice. The typing experience will depend a bit on which keyboard you're using, but generally speaking, Samsung's keyboard, Google's Gboard, and Microsoft's SwiftKey are just all more intuitive and responsive than the iPhone keyboard to me, right down to simple things like moving the cursor. You can't even adjust the iPhone keyboard's size like you can on the Ultra. The iPhone keyboard always wants to interpret what it thinks you want to do instead of just responding to what you actually did and want. Voice to text is reasonably accurate on both. The iPhone's flaw is that it still throws in very random punctuation, commas, periods, etc., where they shouldn't be, but you can turn auto punctuation off in keyboard settings. On the other hand, voice to text on Android likes to capitalize random words for no reason. It's not an issue I found on the iPhone. But back to phone calls real quick. Apple has added a voice isolation feature that was first brought to the market on the Google Pixel 7 series. It works to isolate your voice from annoying background noises like wind, water, or traffic. Just swipe down from the top on the right side of the screen, tap mic mode, and then tap voice isolation. Check it out.
Alright, how's my voice without voice isolation mode? And then with it on, you should be able to hear much of the water.
So what's the move this smartphone season? Is it the Galaxy S23 Ultra, or is it the iPhone 15 Pro Max? I'm not going to sit on the fence and give you some politically correct answer. If I had to pick just one, for me it's the S23 Ultra. I think it's the smartphone of the year. It's the complete package as far as smartphones go in 2023, and I feel like I'm getting more for my money. That's not to say the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max are not good buys. I think it comes down to whether or not you're so entrenched in the Apple ecosystem that getting the iPhone is worth sacrificing whatever extras you get with the Galaxy. Because other than what the Ultra can do that the Pro Max perhaps can't, the things they can both do, they pretty much do equally well. As someone trying to run a tech channel, I have to use them both anyway in order to give you the most informed take I possibly can. And guess what? I really enjoy using both of these. For more on the S23 Ultra, you can check out my 6-month review, link in the description. And by the way, if you like the form factor of the iPhone, but prefer most of what the Galaxy has to offer, you might want to consider the S23 Plus. I've got a review of that one linked in the description as well. As always, these devices were purchased with my own money, so I'm not beholden to either company. And since I finance this channel myself, it would help if you hit that like button, but only if you like the video, of course. Let me know in the comments which phone you think is the one to go for. And if you are picking one up, I've got links in the description to where you can get these phones, as well as some first-party cases. I appreciate all of you watching, and if you don't want to miss mobile tech videos like this, subscribe for free and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I'll catch you all in the next one.